Out of all my recipes in years of cooking, this one has one of the most colorful and interesting stories behind it, as I explain in the text annotations at the start here. If you're using a mobile phone to view this video, you won't see those annotations. I'm not an expert on Persian or Arabian food, so I can't say with certainty how authentic this is to either cuisine. Certainly the ingredients are what you would expect, but I've used some techniques that are probably quite alien to both traditions. The result is really delicious and really unique, with a flavor of roses, but without any hint of the unpleasant soapy fragrance that usually plagues such dishes.
So, I don't usually bother peeling cherry tomatoes, but you know, if you're making food for billionaires, they expect some perks. So we're going to put a little X on each side. Make a little X on each side, and then drop it into a pot of boiling water for a minute, and then an ice bath, just like any other tomato. Then after you peel the skins off, you've got these little jewels of skinless cherry tomatoes, which we'll put aside. These will go in later, and the skins themselves. Now these are actually going to be used in this version. You can ignore this step again and make a simpler version, but this is the premium version. You're going to melt about 50-60 grams of butter in here, somewhere around there, and add the tomato skins to this. And we're going to roast these for a while. It's really, it's called roasting them, but it's really technically not roasting them. But still, that's what the name is that's given to this process. So let this cook for a while. I'll show you what it looks like in a few minutes. Now the butter has melted, tomatoes are cooking. I'm going to add bay leaf and a couple of cardamom pods in there. You don't absolutely have to do this, but you know, it's the little details that make the difference in the end. Cook this on a medium heat. Your purpose here is you want to drive off most of the water. Get them down to where the tomato skins are actually cooking in the fat. And while the tomatoes are cooking, you can get this spice blend going. I have a teaspoon of cumin seeds, about 3/4 of a teaspoon of coarse salt, about half of a small dried chili pepper crumpled up. Just a quarter is even enough. You don't want this to be too spicy. It's just a little background note. And then most important, the kaffir lime leaves. These are dried kaffir lime leaves. This is important to this dish. And it's hard to estimate exactly how much you use because it's too little to weigh, and they're kind of an odd shape. But you kind of estimate a tablespoon. If you crumble them up, you'd want about a tablespoon of the product. And then this goes into a spice mill. And then you take the spices that have been ground and you rub them through a sieve, because there's going to be some little stems and stuff from that kaffir lime that didn't grind up, and you don't want that in the final product. Okay, so these little bits will get thrown out. Here's the perfectly smooth seasoning mix. These tomatoes and butter have been cooking for nearly 20 minutes now. I just checked the temperature, and it's about 240 Fahrenheit, so it's over the boiling point of water. We know that the tomatoes are cooking in the oil, which is what we want. I'm going to give it just a couple minutes longer, and then I'm going to strain this off. Then we strain this out. And tomato solids and cardamom and bay leaf can just be discarded at this point. Just try to squeeze out as much as you can here. This is what we're looking for. And as this clears, you can see some little red bits here in the bottom. It might be hard to see in this video, but those are little bits of tomato skin. So you will still have the tomato skin flavor in this in the end, but you won't have any of the chewy bit. I've got 2 chickens here that I took the quarters off of and deboned the quarters. So this is just the legs and the thighs without any bones, but the skin is on. You can ask your butcher to do this if you can't do it yourself. Ultimately, you can use bone-in, skin-on chicken thighs. It'll be okay too. This is obviously going to be the best because when somebody eats it, there won't be any bones or anything, and it'll just be nice, smooth meat. Plus, we'll be able to clean this up and make it look pretty at the end, as you'll see. Hey, make sure you have everything ready for the next stage. I've got the spices that were ground and passed to the sieve. I'm using canned apricots. I know this is probably strange for a quality recipe, but I've tried many different times to use dried and fresh, and it never comes out as good as canned, so I'm just going to break down and use canned. I've got 4 or 5 garlic cloves here, a stick of true cinnamon. It's not cassia like you usually get, but you can use cassia, it'll be okay. Some saffron that's blooming in the 150 milliliters of water. This is the butter that was cooked with the tomatoes. The tomatoes themselves that were skinned, and 60 grams of shallots that I'm going to slice up in just a minute. This is everything we need for the next step. Of course, plus the chicken that's sitting over here. I have a non-stick pan here. I'm heating on a fairly high temperature, about 7 or 8 out of 10. The only thing I did to this chicken is I sprinkled salt on the skin side, and I'm putting it skin side down. After about 6 minutes, there should be some good browning on the chicken, like this. So we're going to remove it to a plate. Of course, it's still completely raw on the other side, and that's the way we want it. Now, we're left with quite a bit of chicken fat in here. We're going to throw this out. We're going to keep all the bits, the fond that's on there, but get rid of the fat that's on there. Okay, now that the pan has been drained, I'm going to add the shallots that I sliced while that was cooking. Begin scraping up some of that fond from the bottom of the pan. And we cook it like this for just a couple of minutes with just the shallots in the almost dry pan. Then, after a couple of minutes here, we're going to add that butter that the tomatoes were cooked with. Cinnamon stick. Scrape the bottom of the pan. Make sure that there's nothing stuck that's burning here. This is your best chance to do that because you can see everything clearly right now. Okay, get everything up off the bottom. Now I can add the apricots in. We want to get a little bit of color on these, and there's a lot of water in these apricots, so they're gonna cook for a few minutes here in the fat before we get rid of all the water. They actually begin to develop some color on them. Okay, it's been about 3 minutes. You got to be careful you don't burn these shallots. Watch out for that. You want nice brown colors, but you don't want any black. Now I'm going to add the tomatoes in, the peeled tomatoes. Continue cooking. Apricots have just a little bit of color on them, not a lot, but that's the way it should be because we still got to allow for a lot more cooking time here. Okay, it's been about 2 more minutes. Sure everything looks good here. Now I'm going to add in the garlic, and I'm putting them in as whole cloves. The reason why is you want to actually be able to remove these later, or the guest removes it, however it works out. And now the chicken goes back in over the top, and in this case the juices that ran off of the chicken are actually discarded. I don't usually do that, but I do it here because you don't want it to be greasy in any way at the end. Now that the chicken is in there, we've got this spice mixture, which we're going to sprinkle over the top of the skin side. Okay, it's been another 2 or 3 minutes. I have this very rich saffron solution here I'm going to add in. Don't pour it over the top of the chicken or you'll wash the spice mixture off. Pour it in around the edges, like this. And then we're going to put a lid on it, let it begin simmering. Now the heat's been on 7 this whole time, but now I'm finally going to turn the heat way down to just about 3 out of 10 and let it simmer. This is also the time you want to prepare the rice with the black cumin seeds or nigella. And also during this time, we're going to put the final ingredients together. We have about 45 grams of a soft faded cheese. This isn't really the right kind of cheese, but the original real cheese is hard to find, if not impossible. This is 15 grams of scallions, the green part only that was chopped, and we have some dried organic rose leaves. Now, the real ones would use dried rose petals. I can't get those. I don't know where to get those, and you can't just get them from a florist shop, because the kind you buy at a florist has pesticides and stuff on them you don't want to eat. After the chicken has been simmering for 20 minutes, remove the lid. Get the chicken pieces off to a plate so that they can cool down. And now to this, add the scallions and the cheese. Stir this around, continue cooking this. You want the cheese to melt in and the scallions to cook a little bit in the sauce, and the sauce just to thicken too. And as soon as the chicken's cooled, while the sauce is still being made, you got to pull the cinnamon stick out of there, get rid of that. Finally, the other thing you can do is you can flash it under a broiler, and this I do recommend, because the skin right now is kind of soft and gooey. It's okay, but it'll sure be a lot tastier if you put it under the broiler. Meanwhile, the cheese is dissolved into the sauce. It's looking nicely integrated. I'm just gonna let it simmer very, very slowly to thicken up a little bit while I put the chicken under the broiler. And this is what you want to see, crisp skin from under the broiler. And over here we have the sauce that's just about finished.
I'm very pleased to announce the release of Volume 3, The Focus on Food Chemistry. I want to clear up a few things about these 3 volumes. First, they all contain completely different information. There's no duplication, they're not revisions. When I wrote Volume 1, I had 2.5 years of YouTube videos to cover. People had been asking me for the printed list of ingredients for all of those dishes, and so I obliged. There are recipes with stepwise directions and many tips offered throughout, as well as an extensive history of Russian cuisine over the last 1,000 years, but Volume 1 is very different from Volume 2 and 3. In Volumes 2 and 3, I only had about 9 months of YouTube recipes to cover in each, so I was able to provide stepwise directions for everything. In Volume 2, I included a lot of additional information about cooking and some simple examples of flavor chemistry to set the stage for Volume 3. While Volume 2 hopefully got you thinking about some of the processes that go on in cooking and how flavors are expressed and sensed at the molecular level, the topic was painted with pretty broad strokes to make it easy to digest, pun intended. Volume 3 is a milestone in the series, in which I've included an entire introductory course in food chemistry, which is why Volume 3 is about 70 pages longer than Volume 2. If you just want the recipes, that's okay too. You don't have to read the first few chapters, but if you've ever been curious about what influences tastes and flavors and the rationale for deciding cooking times and temperatures and why things taste different when they're combined in different ways, this book will answer many of those questions. It also paves the way for Volume 4, which will be next year. I'm pleased to announce a new, completely different type of cookbook. If you watch my channel regularly, you know that the recipes I present are usually centered on meat or seafood and seldom vegetarian dishes. This new book is a departure from that norm. Only vegetables, fruits, eggs, and dairy are used in dozens of recipes here. The key here is that these recipes don't taste like typical vegetarian food. This isn't a bunch of salads and bean sprouts wrapped in pita bread. These are completely satisfying, hearty dishes that use the science of food chemistry to produce meat-like aromas and flavors. But don't worry, there's no weird chemicals involved, just ordinary foods and spices that you can get in any grocery store. This really is an entirely new approach. These are flavorful, filling meals produced by a distinctive cooking method and unexpected combinations of ingredients. Once you see how it's done and understand the method, you can apply these preparations to some of your own recipes and transform them into vegetarian dishes too. Also look for my cocktail book, Cocktails of the South Pacific and Beyond, Advanced Mixology, available through Amazon online. If you want to know more about my adventures as a chef around the world and have some great laughs along the way, be sure to check out the video tour of my book, 40 Years in One Night. It's up on YouTube right now. Click the link.